Hello, friends, and welcome to Sweet Dreams, where we bring you a new and soothing sleeping story every day. So hit that subscribe button and settle in for tonight's special tale. Have you ever wondered how the dollar bill or the coins in your pocket came to be? What's their story? Why does their value sometimes climb high and other times drop low? Tonight, we're diving into a sleeping story that answers all these questions. This isn't just any tale. It's the doctoral dissertation of Dr. Benjamin Robert Amstead, a brilliant economist and one of the architects of the U.S. Constitution. The story is called The Problem of the Dollar, its origin and its solution. This sleeping story will guide you through the journey of how our dollar evolved from silver coins to the currency we use today. It'll reveal how British colonial policies tried to weaken the American economy and how Dr. Amstead championed a strong and stable dollar to build the foundation for America's economic future. This sleeping story is going to be long and rich, so I suggest sharing or saving this video now so you can listen to it in small parts, taking breaks to drift off or reflect at your own pace. So come along with me on this enlightening journey as we uncover the untold tale of our very own dollar. Chapter 1. The Birth of Money, when goods were traded for goods. Picture a world where money didn't exist, a time when your wallet held no bills, no coins, and not even a digital payment app. So how did folks get what they needed? How did trade work? Back then, there was only one way to trade, known today as the barter system. Simply put, it was goods for goods. If you're a farmer with a surplus of wheat but need clothes, you'd have to find a tailor who has clothes and needs wheat. Sounds simple, doesn't it? But let's dig a little deeper. Was it really that easy? This is where the story of money's birth begins. A tale of a need that changed the face of the world. The biggest problem with this system was the double coincidence of wants. You had to find someone who had exactly what you needed and wanted exactly what you had. Imagine you need boots and you've got rice. You'd need to find a cobbler who wants rice. But if that cobbler needs vegetables instead, your trade falls apart. You'd then have to find a vegetable farmer who wants rice, trade for vegetables, and then take those vegetables to the cobbler to get your boots. You can imagine how complicated, time-consuming, and downright tiring this process was. It kept trade small, limited to nearby towns or communities where folks knew each other's needs. Long-distance trade was nearly impossible. The second big issue was the lack of a standard measure of value. How do you decide how much wheat is worth a yard of cloth? Or how many goats equal one cow? Every trade was a guess, relying entirely on haggling. There was no standard unit to measure value. So one side often got cheated, while the other walked away with an unfair deal. This led to economic inequality and disputes in communities. Now imagine you've worked hard to craft a beautiful clay pot, and in exchange, you get a few pounds of grain. But what if the artistry and effort you put into that pot are worth far more than the grain? You had no way to measure its true value. Your skill, your labor, got no recognition. Trade was driven purely by need. The third, and very significant, problem was saving or storing wealth. Today, we can stash our earnings in a bank or invest them for the future. But back then, what could you save? If you're a farmer, you might store grain, but there's a limit. Grain can spoil over time or get eaten by pests. If you raise livestock, You could keep them, but they need care. They might get sick or die. In short, you couldn't keep your wealth secure for long. This made it hard for folks to plan for the future or build financial stability. Everyone was just scrambling to meet their immediate needs. As a result, large-scale production and economic progress crawled along slowly. Another issue was dividing goods. Say you've got a cow, but you need a pair of boots worth far less than the cow. Are you going to chop off the cow's leg and hand it to the cobbler? Of course not. Many goods couldn't be split into smaller parts, so a lot of trades just didn't happen. These problems pushed people to start thinking, there's got to be something that makes trading easier, something everyone accepts, something with a value everyone agrees on, something easy to carry, something you can save for a long time, and something you can divide into smaller pieces. This search, this need, gave birth to money. At first, folks started using things that were rare, durable, and valued by their community, like seashells, beads, salt, or special stones. This was the first step in money's evolution. It solved many of the barter system's problems. You no longer had to worry about the double coincidence of wants. You could sell your wheat to anyone for seashells, and then use those seashells to buy clothes from someone else. The shells acted as a middleman, but there were still issues. Different places valued different things as money. Seashells might be precious in one town, but worthless in another. Their value could fluctuate wildly. So the need for a more stable, universal solution kept growing. And that's where metals, especially silver and gold, entered the story. These metals had all the qualities of good money. They were rare, durable, could be melted and shaped into any size, and were valued across the world. This sparked the era of coins, a revolution that changed the course of human civilization's economic history. But what was this journey like in America? How did silver coins shape the economy here? And how did the arrival of the British turn the whole game upside down? We'll find those answers in the next chapter, where we'll trace the path from America's early currency history to the start of British colonial rule. Did you know there was a time when the value of our dollar was tied to the price of silver? How did that work? And what changes did the British make that started to weaken America's economic backbone? Stay with us to find out. Chapter 2: The Era of Silver Coins and British Schemes, when the dollar was truly made of silver. In the last chapter, we saw how the problems of bartering forced humans to invent money. Now, let's focus our story on America. America's currency history is long and rich. From Native American trade networks to the early colonial days, we find evidence of coins and trade goods. But we'll start our tale in the era that Dr. Amsted's book focuses on, the time when America's currency system was based on silver. From the colonial period to the early days of British rule, silver coins were the backbone of trade and the economy in America. The dollar, which we now see as paper bills, was once the name of a silver coin with a specific weight. Its value wasn't set by a number printed on paper, but by the amount of silver in the coin. This system was called the silver standard. It meant the nation's currency, the dollar, was entirely tied to silver. You could take your silver to any mint, and they'd turn it into dollar coins based on its weight. You could also melt down your dollar coins to get silver back. This kept the dollar's value stable. The dollar's worth was directly tied to the market price of silver. If silver got pricier on the global market, the dollar grew stronger. If silver got cheaper, the dollar weakened. For the average person back then, this was easy to grasp. The coin in their pocket wasn't just a symbol. It was valuable metal itself. They trusted that their money had real worth. This system had worked smoothly in America for centuries. But then the British arrived. The East India Company slowly took over, gaining political and economic control across America. They started reshaping every system to suit their needs, and the currency system was no exception. At first, they kept the silver standard because it was the established system, and changing it wasn't easy. They began minting their own coins, but these were still silver, and their value depended on the amount of silver they contained. Everything seemed normal, but behind the scenes, a massive scheme was brewing, a scheme tied to changes in the global economy. In the 19th century, many of the world's powerful nations, especially Britain, were gradually abandoning the silver standard for the gold standard. The gold standard meant that a country's currency was based on gold, not silver. Why? Gold was considered even more stable and valuable than silver. Its supply was more limited, so its price didn't swing as wildly. Britain, the world's leading economic power at the time, adopted the gold standard. The problem was that America, Britain's largest colony, was still running on the silver standard. This created major issues for trade and exchange rates between America and Britain. Imagine Britain's currency, the pound, is tied to gold, while America's dollar is tied to silver. The exchange rate between them depended on the relative prices of gold and silver. And that's where the trouble started. In the late 19th century, new silver mines were discovered around the world, especially in places like Nevada. Suddenly, the market was flooded with silver. Basic economics tells us when supply outstrips demand, prices drop. That's exactly what happened with silver. Its price plummeted compared to gold. So what did this mean for America? Since the dollar was tied to silver, as silver's price fell, the dollar's value in global markets tanked too. The dollar became much weaker. This made imports to America incredibly expensive. Machinery, cloth, or anything else America needed from Britain now cost far more dollars. The hardest hit were folks working in Britain or getting pensions or wages in pounds that they sent back to America. When they converted pounds to dollars, they got far fewer dollars than before. On top of that, the American colonial government had to pay Britain a hefty sum every year, called home charges. This sum was meant to cover British officials' salaries, pensions, the costs of maintaining the British Army in America, and other administrative expenses. It had to be paid in pounds. Now, with the dollar weakening, the American colonial government had to shell out far more dollars from its treasury to cover the same fixed amount in pounds. This drained America's coffers and piled on debt. The British saw this problem, but the solution they pursued wasn't in America's best interest. It was in theirs. They started scheming about how to overhaul America's currency system to protect their own economic goals. This marked the beginning of a manipulation of America's economy, which Dr. Amstead analyzed so deeply in his book. So, Did the British try to shift America to the gold standard, or did they pull another trick entirely? A trick that changed the dollar's identity forever and put a burden on the average American's pocket that they couldn't even comprehend. How did this clash between gold and silver drag America's economy into a great battle? The answers will unfold in the next chapter. Chapter 3. The Clash of Gold and Silver, America's Economic Battleground. One nation, two precious metals, and one big question. As we left off in the last chapter, the plummeting price of silver had plunged America's economy into a major crisis. The dollar was steadily weakening. The government's treasury was running dry, and imports were getting pricier by the day. The British faced a critical question: what now? To tackle this, a heated debate sparked among economists, merchants, and government officials in America and Britain. This debate became the battleground for the clash between gold and silver, a struggle that would shape America's economic path for decades to come. There were two main sides in this fight. One side argued that America should follow Britain's lead and adopt the gold standard. The other side wanted to stick with the silver standard or make tweaks to it. Those in favor of the gold standard had a straightforward, compelling case. They argued that since the world's biggest economies were embracing gold, America should too. A gold-based dollar would create a stable exchange rate with the pound, ending the uncertainty in trade. They believed a gold-backed currency was more stable and trustworthy, encouraging foreign investors to pour money into America and strengthening the economy. Many British officials and merchants backed this view because it directly served their business interests. A stable exchange rate meant no losses in trading with America, and they could easily convert their earnings to pounds and send them back to Britain. It sounded great. America adopting the gold standard to keep pace with the world's major economies. But there was another side to the story, one often overlooked: the perspective of America's everyday people, its farmers and small merchants. For centuries, America had relied on silver. People's savings, their jewelry, everything was tied to silver. The people trusted silver. If the government suddenly declared that the dollar would no longer be silver but gold, it would have caused a massive uproar across the country. The silver coins and jewelry people held could have lost their value overnight. Besides, America was a poor nation. Making gold the basis of currency was an expensive proposition. The government would have needed to buy huge amounts of gold, which the treasury couldn't afford. Gold was also out of reach for ordinary folks. Using gold coins for everyday small transactions was impractical. That's why another group advocated for sticking with the silver standard. They argued that silver was the best fit for America's social and economic conditions. They believed the drop in silver's price was temporary and things would stabilize over time. They also pointed out that a weaker dollar was boosting America's exports. When the dollar was weak, American goods became cheaper for foreign buyers, making it easier for farmers growing cotton, hemp, or grain, and artisans crafting goods by hand to sell in international markets. Their sales were up, increasing their income. This side included many American merchants and patriotic leaders who prioritized the nation's interests. They resisted British pressure that only aimed to benefit British traders. This debate raged for years. The government set up committees and drafted reports. But no solid solution emerged. The British were in a bind. Adopting the gold standard risked sparking a massive social and economic revolt in America. Sticking with the silver standard hurt their own trade interests and made governing America costly. It was a puzzle with no easy answer. In the meantime, the government took temporary steps. They stopped minting silver dollar coins for the public. This meant folks could no longer bring their silver to the mint to make coins. The government took control of the dollar's supply, marking the beginning of the end for the silver standard. They tried to artificially control the dollar's value to shield it from silver's falling prices. This was a huge and controversial move. It detached the dollar from its natural value. No longer just a piece of metal, the dollar became a token issued by the government, its value set by their decree. Dr. Amstead closely watched and analyzed this debate. He realized this wasn't just a fight between gold and silver. It was about America's economic future and its sovereignty. He saw how the British were manipulating America's economy to serve their own interests, pushing solutions that looked good but came at the expense of the American people. He stressed that a nation's currency policy should prioritize its people's interests, not bend to foreign pressure. So how did this clash of gold and silver end? Did America adopt the gold standard? Or did the British find a middle path, a third option? One that created the illusion of a gold standard, but was something else entirely, a web of deception that changed the dollar forever. What was this web, and how did it work? We'll find out in the next chapter, where we'll uncover the truth behind the golden dream called the gold standard. Chapter 4. The golden dream of the gold standard. Was it really gold? The truth behind the promise of stability. In the last few chapters, we've seen how the falling price of silver shook America's economy and sparked a great battle between gold and silver. On one side were the British government and merchants pushing for America to adopt the gold standard. On the other were American interests tied to silver. Amid this debate and uncertainty, the term gold standard sounded like a magical fix, a golden dream, a promise to stabilize the dollar and connect the economy to the world. But before any major economic change, it's crucial to understand how the system actually works. So let's dive into this golden dream, the gold standard, and explore it in simple terms and see just how practical it was for America. The core idea of the gold standard is straightforward. It means a country's paper money or coins are directly tied to a fixed amount of gold. The government guarantees that you can take its currency to a bank and exchange it for a set amount of gold. For example, imagine the government says $1 equals 1 gram of gold. That means you can walk into a bank, hand over a $1 bill, and walk out with 1 gram of gold. Under this system, the government can only print as many dollars as it has gold in its reserves. It can't just print endless bills on a whim. That's what makes this system so strong and trustworthy. It keeps the currency's value stable, and people trust their money. They know the paper in their pocket isn't just paper. It's a promise of gold. Another big advantage of the gold standard is in international trade. When two countries are on the gold standard, the exchange rate between their currencies stays nearly fixed. Say in America, $1 equals 1 gram of gold. And in Britain, 1 pound equals 2 grams of gold. That automatically sets 1 pound equal to $2. This rate won't budge unless one country changes the gold value of its currency. This stability is a huge help for importers and exporters. They don't have to worry about sudden currency fluctuations causing losses. It gives a big boost to international trade and investment. That's why, in the 19th century, Britain and other European countries adopted this system, seeing it as a symbol of economic progress. They wanted America to join the club, but every golden dream comes with a cost, and maintaining the gold standard had its own challenges and downsides. The first and biggest hurdle was having enough gold. To run this system, the government needed a massive stockpile of gold in its treasury to convince people it could keep its promise. For a large, poor country like America, gathering that much gold was a daunting challenge. The country either needed to export a ton to earn gold or borrow it, which would pile on more debt. Dr. Amstead saw this clearly. He argued that America's economic situation couldn't handle the heavy burden of the gold standard. It was an expensive and impractical system being forced on the nation. Another major flaw of the gold standard was that it tied the government's hands. During an economic downturn, when the economy needs a cash boost to get moving, but government can't just print more money because it doesn't have extra gold. This can deepen a recession and spike unemployment. The government's economic policies end up depending on gold reserves, not the country's actual needs. It's like chaining the economy to gold. Plus, if a new gold mine is discovered in a country, the sudden increase in money supply can send inflation soaring. In other words, the entire economy hinges on the availability of one metal, a risky setup. Adopting the gold standard in America would mean upending a centuries-old social and economic system. As we've discussed, the lives of ordinary Americans were tied to silver. Their savings were in silver. Switching to the gold standard would devalue the savings of millions overnight. It was a move that could spark unrest and discontent across the nation. The British government understood these challenges. They knew imposing a pure gold standard in America was nearly impossible. They needed a solution that would kill the snake without breaking the stick, a system that seemed like the gold standard to protect their international trade interests, but was really a clever new way to exploit America's resources. They were weaving a web that sparkled like gold, but wasn't. Instead of directly adopting the gold standard, they proposed a system called the Gold Exchange Standard. The name sounded like the gold standard, but its workings and outcomes were worlds apart. It was a deception, a sleight of hand that even the sharpest economists of the time struggled to fully grasp. But Dr. Amstead's keen eye saw through it. In his book, he tore apart this system layer by layer, proving it was designed not to strengthen America's economy, but to keep it subservient to Britain. So, what was this gold exchange standard? How was it different from the gold standard? And why did Dr. Amstead consider it so dangerous for America? We'll unravel this cunning system's web in the next chapter. Chapter 5, The British Web, the Deception of the Gold Exchange Standard, when your money is no longer yours. In the last chapter, we explored the golden dream of the gold standard and its reality. we learned that the British lacked the courage to impose a pure gold standard in America. But they needed a solution, and the one they devised was one of the most significant deceptions in American economic history. It was called the gold exchange standard. The name itself was a trick, using the word gold to create the illusion of a gold-based, robust system. But the truth was far from that. Today, we'll unravel this web and see through Dr. Amsted's eyes how it was an economic trap for America. So what exactly was the gold exchange standard? Under the gold standard, your currency could be directly exchanged for gold. But with the gold exchange standard, that wasn't the case. In this system, American dollars couldn't be swapped for gold directly. Instead, they had to be converted into another currency that was on the gold standard, namely the British pound sterling. So if you had dollars and wanted gold, you couldn't just get it. You'd first need to exchange your dollars for pounds at a fixed rate, then go to London to buy gold with those pounds. This process was so complex and difficult that it was completely out of reach for the average American. It was only practical for big importers or the government. You might be wondering, what's the big deal? The deal was huge. This system turned the American dollar into a servant of the British pound. The dollar lost its independent identity. Its value was no longer tied to gold, but to the pound. The dollar's price was artificially pegged to the pound at a fixed rate. This meant that if the British pound strengthened or weakened, the dollar felt the impact directly, no matter America's own economic situation. The key to our economy was now in the hands of a few people sitting in London. It was a form of economic enslavement, cleverly hidden behind a complex economic policy. Dr. Amsted identified the greatest danger. This system gave the American colonial government, really the British government, unlimited power to print paper money without restraint. Recall that under the gold standard, the government could only print as many dollars as it had gold in reserve. But the gold exchange standard had no such limit. In America, dollars weren't tied directly to gold, but to the British pound. The government didn't need to keep gold in America, just a reserve of pounds sterling in London. The result? The American colonial government started printing far more dollars than needed. When too much money floods the market without enough goods to match, inflation spikes, and that's exactly what happened in America. To fund its costly administration and military expenses, the government kept printing dollars recklessly, and the burden of this inflation fell on ordinary Americans. Another devastating outcome was the draining of America's gold reserves. When exports outpaced imports, America earned foreign currency, which could have been used to buy gold and strengthen its reserves. But under the gold exchange standard, the government didn't do that. Instead, it pegged the dollar to the pound at an artificially high rate. This made American exports more expensive and imports cheaper, encouraging people to buy foreign goods. This threw America's trade balance out of whack. Whatever gold did come into America was sent to London to bolster the pound reserves, rather than being kept locally. In other words, America's earnings, its gold, were filling Britain's coffers instead of staying in America. Dr. Amsted called this organized looting, a system legally siphoning off America's wealth. For the average person, this was a deception they couldn't even grasp. They thought the dollar was stable, unaware that this artificial stability was being paid for out of their own pockets. Inflation was quietly eating away at their savings. The hard-earned money of a farmer selling crops bought less than it used to. It was like an invisible tax every American was paying. Dr. Amstead, with data and facts in his book, proved how this system fueled crippling inflation in America and stifled the growth of local industries. This system was designed solely to protect British interests. Its goal wasn't to strengthen America's economy, but to keep it forever dependent on Britain. It was a web that stripped the dollar of its true value, turning it into a shadow of the British pound. But what exactly was the impact of this invisible looting, this inflation, on the lives of ordinary people? How was the dollar's falling value snatching food from every American's plate and money from their pockets? We'll see the full, painful picture in the next chapter. Chapter 6, The Falling Dollar, a robbery on the common man's pocket. When your hard-earned money is worth nothing. In the last chapter, we unraveled the web of the gold exchange standard, a deception designed to exploit America's economy. But economic policies don't just live in books or government files. They have a direct, deep impact on the lives of ordinary citizens. Today, we'll explore that impact. We'll learn how the dollar's falling value, skyrocketing inflation, turned the lives of America's everyday people, farmers, laborers, and small merchants into a struggle. This isn't just a story of numbers, but of the pain and hardship of millions whose pockets were robbed daily by an invisible thief. First, let's understand what it means when we say the dollar's value is falling. One meaning is its decline against foreign currencies like the pound, which we've already discussed. But even more critical is its loss of purchasing power at home, what we call inflation. Imagine today you can buy 10 pounds of flour with $100. If a year later, that same $100 only buys 8 pounds, the dollar's value has dropped. The bill still says 100, but its real power is weaker. Under the gold exchange standard, the government's reckless printing flooded the market with dollars. But the production of essentials like grain, cloth, or other necessities didn't keep up. The result? Prices for everything soared. The most devastating impact hit farmers. America was and still is a farming nation. A farmer would grow crops, sell them, and use the money to meet their needs. With inflation soaring, they had to spend more on seeds, fertilizer, rent, and family essentials. But their crops often didn't fetch higher prices fast enough. They were forced to sell to middlemen or at government-regulated markets at fixed rates. Their costs kept rising, but their income didn't. They were trapped in a vicious cycle, growing poorer year by year. Inflation, like a termite, was quietly eating away at their hard-earned money. They sank deeper into debt, a burden that often lasted generations. The next hardest hit were laborers and fixed-income folks, clerks, teachers, or small government workers. Their wages stayed the same, but market prices climbed daily. The paycheck they got at the start of the month was gone before it ended. Budgeting became impossible. People had to cut back on essentials. Education for their kids, good food, healthcare, these became luxuries. They worked day and night, but their financial situation only worsened. They couldn't understand why, despite working harder, they were getting poorer. They thought it was bad luck. But in truth, It was the result of a flawed, exploitative economic policy. Dr. Amstead felt this pain deeply and gave it a voice through his writings. Inflation's other cruel effect was on savings. People save for future needs, weddings, building a home, or security in old age. But when inflation runs rampant, the value of those savings shrinks. Imagine you put $1,000 in the bank. 10 years later, it's still $1,000, but it might not even buy what $100 buys today. Inflation attacks your future security. It discourages saving, pushing people to spend everything now. This lowers the nation's savings rate, which is vital for any economy's growth. That's exactly what was happening in America. People felt insecure about their future, and the nation's economic progress stalled. This suited the British just fine. A poor, weak American couldn't muster the strength to challenge them. They were so tangled in meeting daily needs that they had no time to think about political or economic rights. On top of that, inflation was crushing America's small businesses and trades. Raw materials cost more, and their profits dwindled. Meanwhile, British companies found it easy to import cheaply and sell their goods in America. The whole system was rigged to block America from becoming self-reliant and to keep it a market for Britain forever. Dr. Amstead exposed this entire plot. He argued that a good currency system isn't just about stabilizing exchange rates. It's about keeping prices stable at home. For him, money's true purpose wasn't to ease international trade, but to provide economic stability and security for ordinary citizens. Pointing out the problem wasn't enough, though. Solutions were needed. So, what solution did Dr. Amstead propose for this crisis? What path did he chart for a stable, strong dollar? What was his foolproof fix that not only stabilized the dollar's value, but also stopped the robbery of the common man's pocket for good? We'll uncover this revolutionary solution in the next chapter. Chapter 7. Dr. Amstead's foolproof solution, advocating for a stable dollar. Striking at the root of the problem. So far in our journey, we've dug into the heart of the dollar's troubles. We've seen how it moved from the simple days of silver to getting trapped in the complex, exploitative web of the gold exchange standard. We've felt how this system fueled inflation and broke the backs of ordinary Americans. Now, we've reached the point where we talk not just about the problem, but the solution, one proposed by none other than Dr. Benjamin Robert Amstead in his groundbreaking thesis that gave American economic thought a new direction. This chapter is dedicated to his foolproof solution, as relevant today as it was then. Dr. Amstead laid out his case clearly and logically. He argued that America's currency policy shouldn't focus on stabilizing international exchange rates, as the British were doing. Instead, its sole and most critical goal should be maintaining price stability at home, keeping inflation in check. For him, a good currency was one that protected the purchasing power of ordinary people. He believed that only when prices are stable can economic justice prevail. Only then does a laborer get fair pay for their work, a farmer get a just price for their crops, and a saver feel secure about their future. This was a revolutionary idea at a time when economists worldwide were obsessed with exchange rate stability. So, how could this internal stability be achieved? Dr. Amstead rejected both the gold standard and the gold exchange standard. He argued that the gold standard was too expensive and impractical for a poor country like America, chaining the economy to gold and limiting the government's ability to make policies when needed. The gold exchange standard he called a deception and organized looting, as it allowed unchecked money printing, driving up inflation. So what was the way forward? Dr. Amstead proposed a path that was a middle ground, but better than both extremes. He suggested that America should tie its currency to gold, but not directly. His proposal was to fix the dollar's value to a specific amount of gold, but without allowing dollars to be exchanged for gold in everyday transactions. You couldn't walk into a shop and demand gold for your dollar bills. Converting to gold would only be allowed for major international payments handled by the government. This would prevent the nation's gold from being frittered away on personal use or jewelry, keeping it safely stored in the central bank as a strong reserve. This was a modified, more practical version of the gold standard, often called the gold bullion standard. It gave the dollar the backing of gold, maintaining public trust, while avoiding the inconvenience of using gold in daily transactions. But the most critical and revolutionary part of his solution wasn't this. It was his idea for controlling the money supply. Dr. Amstead deeply understood that inflation's root cause was the government's unchecked printing of money. So, he advocated for a rule to limit this power. He proposed that issuing currency should be taken out of the government's hands and given to an independent institution, what we now call a central bank or reserve bank. This institution would operate under strict laws ensuring it couldn't print money beyond a set limit. These laws would tie the money supply to the nation's economic growth and production, not the government's spending whims. This was a bold, radical step, directly curbing the government's financial power. Dr. Amstead believed that without strict, scientific control over the money supply, price stability was impossible, and the common person would continue to be exploited. He argued that a stable currency is the foundation of a strong, just society. It's not just an economic issue, but a social and moral one. An unstable currency hits the poorest and weakest the hardest. Advocating for a stable dollar was, in essence, a fight for social justice. Dr. Amstead's solution was visionary. He not only addressed the immediate crisis, but laid out a path for the future, one that remains a guiding principle for central banks worldwide today. But why is a stable currency so crucial for a nation? How does it shape a country's character and future? Why is a stable currency the cornerstone of a strong nation? We'll explore these profound questions in the next chapter. Chapter 8, The Foundation of a Strong Nation, Why a Stable Currency Matters. The dollar's stability and the nation's pride. In the last chapter, we learned about Dr. Amstead's foolproof solution, a currency policy centered not on exchange rates, but on price stability at home. He called for an independent central bank and strict control over the money supply. Now, the question is, why is a stable currency so vital for any country? Why isn't it just a topic for economists' books? How does it tie directly to a nation's pride, progress, and the future of its people? Today, we'll reflect on this deep subject and understand why a stable currency is the most critical stone in the foundation of a strong nation. First and foremost, A stable currency builds trust among citizens. When people believe the money in their pockets will hold roughly the same value tomorrow as it does today, they can plan for the future. They're encouraged to save. They're willing to take risks on long-term investments. These savings and investments are the engine of a nation's economic growth. When people save, banks have money to lend to businesses. When businesses use that money to build factories, they create jobs. This sparks a positive cycle that propels the entire nation toward progress. In contrast, when a currency is unstable and inflation soars, people rush to spend their money quickly, fearing it will be worth even less tomorrow. This kills the investment climate and stalls economic growth. Second, a stable currency promotes social justice. As Dr. Amstead repeatedly emphasized, inflation hits the poorest and most vulnerable the hardest. The wealthy have ways to protect their assets, investing in land, gold, or city properties whose values rise with inflation. But a poor laborer, farmer, or pensioner with a fixed income is helpless against inflation. It silently steals food from their table and hope from their children's future, widening the gap between rich and poor. That's why a stable currency and controlled inflation are the most critical policies for the poor. They ensure economic growth benefits every class, not just a select few. Third, a stable, respected currency boosts a nation's global reputation. When other countries trust your currency, they're drawn to invest in your nation. Foreign companies set up businesses, bringing new technology and better jobs. A stable currency makes it easier for your traders to do business abroad without worrying about unpredictable losses. A strong, stable currency projects an image of a robust economy worldwide. It's not just an economic symbol, but a badge of national pride and honor. When the dollar is strong, every American feels proud, a sign the nation is moving in the right direction. Moreover, a stable currency forces the government to stay financially disciplined. Without the power to print money at will, the government must keep its spending within its income. It avoids wasteful expenses and uses the nation's resources efficiently. This reduces corruption and brings transparency to policies. Instead of burdening people with heavy taxes, the government focuses on growing the economy to boost revenue. Thus, a stable currency drives not just economic, but also political and administrative reforms, making the entire system more accountable and efficient. Dr. Amstead understood all this deeply. He knew America's freedom couldn't be just political. True freedom would come only with economic independence and self-reliance. The first step toward that was a stable, sovereign currency system. He dreamed of an America where every citizen felt economically secure, where their hard-earned money was respected, and where economic policies were crafted in Philadelphia, not London, with the people's interests at heart. His vision was of a dollar that was stable at home and respected worldwide. His dream and ideas didn't go to waste. The seeds he planted grew into a monumental institution that still guards America's economy today. Can you guess which institution that is and how pivotal Dr. Amstead's ideas were in its creation? This thrilling story unfolds in the next chapter. Chapter 9, The Birth of the Reserve Bank. Amstead's ideas triumph. A dream becomes reality. Our story has reached its most pivotal moment. we've unraveled the dollar's trouble, seen the British government's exploitative policies, and explored Dr. Amsted's revolutionary solutions. We've also learned why a stable currency is so vital for a nation. But no matter how powerful ideas are, they remain incomplete until put into action. In this chapter, we'll see how Dr. Amsted's ideas didn't stay confined to the pages of a book. They laid the foundation for America's most critical economic institution, the American Reserve Bank. This is the story of one person's intellectual triumph, a dream turned into reality. As we've seen in previous chapters, Dr. Amsted stressed that the power to issue and control currency shouldn't rest with the government. Governments often print excessive money for political gain or to cover expenses. He strongly advocated for an independent, autonomous central bank that would operate free from political pressure, guided solely by the nation's economic interests. This was a progressive idea for its time. The British government opposed such an institution as it would strip them of their control over America's economy. They wanted a bank that danced to their tune. But Dr. Amsted's arguments carried such weight, and his research was so thorough that ignoring them was impossible. His book, The Problem of the Dollar, sent ripples through academic and political circles in America and Britain. It forced people to rethink the issues of America's currency system with a fresh, clear perspective. Meanwhile, the demand for a central bank in America was gaining momentum. In 1926, the Royal Commission on American Currency and Finance, also known as the Hilton-Young Commission, was formed. Its task was to examine America's currency and financial system and recommend reforms for the future. When the commission visited America, Dr. Benjamin Robert Amsted presented his ideas and research. He handed them a copy of his book and proved through his arguments how vital an independent central bank was for America's economic stability. He outlined the bank's structure, functions, and powers in detail. It's said that the Hilton-Young Commission was deeply impressed by Dr. Amsted's analysis and solutions. His book served as a guiding light for the commission. Many of their recommendations were directly inspired by his ideas. The commission's most significant proposal was to establish a central bank in America to be called the American Reserve Bank. They recommended that this bank have sole authority to issue currency and be largely free from government control to operate independently. This was a monumental victory for Dr. Amsted's ideas. What he had advocated years earlier in his thesis was now being endorsed by the nation's most critical financial reform committee. Though it took a few more years for these recommendations to become law, slowed by political debates and delays, the American Reserve Bank Act was finally passed in 1934. On April 1st, 1935, the American Reserve Bank officially began its work. This wasn't just the founding of an institution. It was the birth of a new way of thinking. It was an acknowledgement that economic policy should be driven by sound principles, not political needs. The American Reserve Bank gave the nation an institution to safeguard its financial health, control inflation, and maintain the dollar's stability. Dr. Amsted's dream was coming true. While the bank's initial structure wasn't exactly as he envisioned, its core concept and purpose aligned with his advocacy. Today, the American Reserve Bank stands among the world's most respected central banks, thanks to the foundational principles laid by visionary thinkers like Dr. Amstead. This story teaches us the immense power of knowledge and reason. One person, with their pen and intellect, can change the economic course of a nation. Dr. Amstead proved he was not just a social reformer or constitutional architect, but a world-class economist whose insights were far ahead of his time. His legacy lives on in the American Reserve Bank, which protects the economic interests of millions of Americans every day. But what lessons can we draw from this long, turbulent story of the dollar for our personal lives today? Does this historical tale offer any wisdom for protecting and growing our wealth? We'll explore the answer in the final chapter of our audiobook. Chapter 10: Lessons from History to Today. How to Protect Your Wealth. Lessons from the dollar's story for personal finance. Friends, we've traveled a long, enlightening journey through the story of the dollar. From the days of bartering to silver coins, through the British government's economic web, to the founding of the American Reserve Bank, we've witnessed Dr. Amstead's extraordinary brilliance. He not only analyzed a complex problem, but offered a lasting solution. But what does this entire story, this history, mean for our lives today? How can you and I, ordinary citizens, draw lessons from this historical saga for our personal finances? This final chapter is dedicated to those lessons that can help us protect and grow our hard-earned money. The first and most critical lesson this story teaches is to understand the danger of inflation. We saw how, during the gold exchange standard, the government's reckless money printing fueled inflation, eroding people's savings and purchasing power. Inflation is like an invisible thief, quietly shrinking the value of your money. Even today, though we have a strong reserve bank, inflation remains an economic reality. That's why we shouldn't just keep our savings in a bank account or as cash at home. Doing so lets inflation slowly eat away at your wealth. We must learn to invest our savings in places where the returns outpace inflation, whether that's mutual funds, the stock market, real estate, or gold. Investing isn't a luxury anymore. It's a necessity to shield your wealth from inflation. If you don't put your money to work, inflation will devour it. The second lesson is the importance of a stable, diversified portfolio. In the dollar story, we saw the struggle between gold and silver and how over-reliance on one metal plunged the economy into crisis. The same principle applies to our personal investments. Never put all your money in one place, whether it's a single stock, just property, or only gold. This is called diversification. Spread your investments across different asset classes like equities, bonds, gold, and real estate. This reduces risk. If one sector slumps, another can prop up your portfolio. Just as a balanced monetary policy is vital for a stable economy, a diversified investment portfolio is essential for a secure financial future. The third lesson teaches us to understand our currency and economy. Dr. Amstead grasped that complex economic system because he studied it. Today, we need financial literacy more than ever. We should strive to understand how the Reserve Bank's policies work, how interest rate changes affect our mortgages or investments, and how global economic news impacts our personal finances. When you understand these things, you make better financial decisions. You avoid rumors and bad advice, building a solid plan for your future. Knowledge is the greatest power, and financial knowledge leads to financial freedom. You can subscribe to our channel, Sweet Dreams Legends, where we bring you more enlightening topics like this. If you'd like us to create a detailed audiobook on personal finance, let us know in the comments below. The fourth and final lesson is about foresight and long-term thinking. Dr. Amsted's solutions weren't just for immediate problems. They were visionary, laying the foundation for America's economic future for decades. Similarly, in our financial lives, we should focus on long-term goals, not short-term gains. Don't panic over the stock market's daily ups and downs. Create a solid financial plan and stick to it with discipline. Saving and investing isn't a one-day game. It's a marathon. Those who walk this path with patience and discipline achieve a prosperous, secure financial life. The story of the dollar isn't just about a currency. It's a tale of a nation's fight for self-respect. It's the story of knowledge, power to challenge mighty empires' policies. And it's about principles that remain as relevant today as ever. Dr. Amsted's book teaches us to stay vigilant about our economic rights and demand a system that's transparent and protects the interests of ordinary people. It shows us that a stable dollar isn't just an economic necessity. It's the hallmark of a strong, just nation. Conclusion: the dollar's journey, the essence of Amsted's vision. And so, friends, our journey comes to a close. Through the pages of Dr. Benjamin Robert Amsted's historic book, The Problem of the Dollar, we've traced the dollar's story from its birth to its struggles and evolution. We saw a time when goods were traded for goods, followed by the era of silver coins. We unraveled the cunning policies of the British government, which, under the guise of the gold exchange standard, exploited America's economy and plunged it into the fires of inflation. But in that darkness, we also saw a shining sun of knowledge in Dr. Amsted. We explored his foolproof solutions, which didn't just dissect the problem, but offered a lasting, visionary fix. He emphasized the importance of a stable currency and championed an independent central bank, ideas that laid the foundation for the American Reserve Bank. Finally, we drew vital personal finance lessons from this historic journey for our lives today. I thank you all, from the bottom of my heart, for joining me on this long, enlightening journey. I hope this story has enriched your knowledge and inspired you to see the dollar and America's economy in a new light. If you enjoyed this effort, please like this video. Drop them in the comments section below. We love reading and responding to your comments. And if you want to keep hearing deep, inspiring story like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Sweet Dreams Legends.